ladies and gentlemen, in the blue corner, standing at a sleek 5'11", 245 pounds, the tumultuous tempest of technique, Thomas Lilley. And in the red corner, at a curvaceous 5'11", 315 pounds, the jovial juggernaut of judgment, John Sheridan. A meeting of the masters of mastication. Turn your attention as they delve deep into all things lifting and more. This is Peak Speak.
Synchronization goals.
Excellent. I love it.
I went to uni with a girl that was on the Commonwealth and Olympic synchronized swimming team, like the Australian synchronized swimming team.
It's a really interesting sport, synchronized swimming.
Yeah, she destroyed her labrum doing it, so I can relate to her on that.
How do you destroy your labrum in a sport that involves almost exclusively water-based activities?
Oh, because people get labral tears, like joint issues like that, because of lack of control and stability. So basically taking their joints to end range without having stability at end range.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like half the time their legs aren't in the water, they're kind of dangling out doing all the tricks and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. And there'd be, I'd imagine, a lot of like crazy flexibility training stuff that they'd be putting people like that through.
Yeah. Anyway, I said that was synchronization goals, and then it made me think of that, synchronized swimming. Then it made me think of her. Then it made me think of how, an athlete representing Australia at Olympics and Commonwealth Games, and they paid for everything. They paid for all of their transport to and from training, to and from competitions. They paid for all their training on their own. It was a very expensive sport.
Yeah,
because they're training like 6 days a week. It's crazy. And
it's not like you can do a lot of dry land training with that sort of stuff. Like you have to be in a pool for most of that, I would imagine.
Yeah. And there's so many sports that are like that just get no support, even though they've got people that are representing the country for it. It's interesting.
Yeah, man, and yet there's still so many people in powerlifting who think powerlifting is going to go to the Olympics and be this great, amazing, top-tier professional sport.
I think it will go to the Olympics. Like, I've been in powerlifting for 12 years now, and I still find watching powerlifting extremely boring. So there's definitely a chance that the general public is going to love watching 12 guys spotting and loading a bench press where you can't see anything because everything's blocked by equipment. So I definitely think powerlifting's got a shot.
I had that conversation with someone recently. They were like, oh, why won't it go to the Olympics? Like, man, have you ever sat through an 8-hour powerlifting meet? It's really fucking boring. Like, there's a lot of downtime, and there's 7 dudes on a platform, and you don't actually know what's happening. And then you compare it to weightlifting, where it's one guy or one girl on the platform with one barbell, and it's over in like a fraction of a second. Either it happened or it didn't, and they walk away. And whereas with powerlifting, it's like, oh well, that looked like he got that squat. Oh no, it was like a little bit off. Or the technicalities, I think, just make it a little too nuanced is probably the word to describe it, in order for it to be a good spectator sport. I think it has the potential to be like, something like Big Dogs. If you could do that and cut it into like a 30-minute television show with background interviews and things like that, I think that could be really, really cool. But I certainly don't think it's ever going to be in the Olympics. But, you can hold out hope.
I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me, to be honest.
Yeah, me neither, man. Me neither. I'm not going to the Olympics anytime soon. So I'll just keep plugging away here in Canberra.
And I really like your shirt.
Yeah, thanks, man. I found it.
I
found it on the street, and it just happened to fit.
Oh, that's perfect. I wish I had a belly set shirt that didn't disintegrate.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with that, because you're literally the only one that's ever happened to.
Just the unlucky one, the chosen one.
Yeah, perhaps. We're getting a new line. It's maybe coming in next week, I think. I'll send you one. What size are you? Good. Like an extra medium these days?
A schmedium. Small on the sleeves, medium on the stomach.
Nice. I like it. All right. I
All
feel
right.
like that's nearly 5 minutes of pre-show bullshit. So
All right, let's go into 40 minutes of just straight bullshit.
Yeah, just general bullshit. I'm down.
Cardio.
Cardi, no.
Fun fact, cardio is actually a shortened version of a longer word, cardiovascular.
I thought it
to
was
Peak
Spanish.
Speak.
I thought it was Spanish, but perhaps not.
Donde está cardio? Me gusta cardio.
Don't pretend you know how to speak Spanish. You're you're ruining it for everyone, Thomas.
I only know Spanish from Breaking Bad. Los Pollos Hermanos.
I actually just finished watching that season, that whole series recently. I hadn't ever got to the end of it, and it was really enjoyable. Anyway, so we're talking about cardiovascular fitness. Not fit this burger in my mouth, but fitness from a how your heart functions perspective.
So now that all the bad shirt slogans are now removed, all the cardi nose and fitness this burger in this mouth or whatever, let's actually talk. So I think a big problem in powerlifting is that cardio is seen as something that will negatively impact performance, and people exist in this kind of realm where their view of cardio is kind of a one-size-fits-all. And the problem is that when you remove something like that, it kind of ignores the fact that you're a human being that exists outside of the sport of powerlifting as well. So that's, I guess, what we really wanted to pick apart today is the trade-off between health and performance.
Yeah, and I think it's a subject that I know I have drastically changed my views on in the last 5 or 6 years. When I first started lifting, I came out of a decade of rugby union, so I have done enough disgusting suicide sprints to last me the rest of my life. And I found a sport that involved all the fun bits of training for rugby, which was lifting heavy and maybe drinking a beer on the weekends. And I didn't have to run anywhere or ever. So for me, I was like, fuck yeah, I'm down for this life. Anything over 5's cardio. This is bullshit. I only ever get my heart rate up by holding my breath and lifting something really heavy. And now I'm in a position where most of my training lately has been far more that sort of stuff. I rode I sat on a erg and rode for 10Ks the other day, or a few weeks ago now, just to see if I could. And I'm not going down the marathon route, but I think I have a much better appreciation for how that's going to have a positive impact upon the rest of my life, because I have an identity and a life outside of powerlifting, believe it or not.
I think the issue is that it's worn as a badge of honor to be unfit or to be overweight or to be fat or to be slow or whatever. It's like, I can squat 300 kilos, but I can't walk up a flight of stairs without, losing my breath. I can't tie my shoelaces up.
Yeah, I wear slip-on shoes because I can't tie my own shoelaces up.
I don't know, people wear that as a badge of honor. Think about the mechanics of that. That sucks. I don't want to live like that.
Yeah, look, and I did. I am unashamed in saying that I was one of those people. And I have matured as a person and discovered that there is more to life than being fat and strong. I think it's a message that is not spoken about enough. It's definitely spoken about more now because of things like CrossFit and people like Chad. I think Chad Wesley Smith is a great example of someone who's pursued an athletic pursuit that isn't powerlifting and has had a much better appreciation for that positive impact. That, the fitter you are, the easier it is to lift heavy weights.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I'm one of your clients and I come up and I say, hey John, can I do cardio? How do I fit cardio into my training? I've got a comp in 6 months.
Well, then the first question I'm always going to ask with any sort of scenario like that is why. What do you want to get out of it? Why are you going down that road? Why is it an idea that you've had? And there's a variety of different answers to that, obviously. But also you've got to start to look at what do you define as cardio? Because if you're trying to train for a national powerlifting comp and your definition of cardio is running 10Ks 3 times a week, there's going to be some trade-off for performance there. But from a general health and fitness standpoint, yeah, for sure, there's definitely some ways we can address things like that. It obviously depends on how you're training and what your training weeks looks like, but the easiest one to start with is just don't spend 16 minutes resting between sets. Be a little bit less lazy in how you train in the gym for starters, because you'll get a definite positive impact from that. And then we have to have a deeper discussion about why you're doing things and what you're looking to get out of adding something like that to training. And I think that is relevant to adding anything to training. Why are you doing it? What's the end goal? And then we can talk about the trade-off between what you're doing and what you're going to add in, and are you going to see a change in what you're doing and the results you're getting? And we can go from there. So why do you want to add cardio, Thomas?
So, all right, well, we'll keep going down this road.
No, we don't have to. But what were you going to say? Sorry, I interrupted.
I was just going to say, I mean, what you just said is perfect. It all depends on what the end goal is. So if we're talking powerlifting, most people's end goal is to be stronger, right? But your training isn't powerlifting training all the time, as in it's not specific 1 rep max squat bench deadlift. In order to push those numbers up, most of the time you're going to be living in the land of like 65 to 85, 90%.
Yep.
Generally an average of what's in the middle of there, right? So it comes down to a question of if you're going to add anything, and it may be cardio or it may be anything else, the same rules apply. So, but specifically talking about cardio, if you're going to add cardio in, it's about assessing the impact that it's going to have on your training, because there's no reason why you can't be more fit or working towards being more fit without impacting your training at all. It just becomes a measure of, or it becomes a case of measuring, okay, well, I've added in a little bit of walking, a little bit of rowing, maybe even a little bit of jogging or cycling or whatever. Is this impacting my performance? Is this impacting my recovery? Is there any modalities that I can then add to improve recovery? Do I need to eat a little bit more if I'm adding a little bit more into my training? Do I need to take a little bit more away from accessories? So the question of whether or not you can add it in, of course you definitely can add it in.
Yeah.
As you become more specific and more closer to the end goal, like a competition or a test day, you're probably going to pull back on that to, backload better performance, to save some recovery. And it's just that at that very point in time, you may be a little bit less fit than you are generally. And that's okay. It's like, you don't want to test your marathon when you're training for a sprint. It's okay to have conflicting or systems take a back step for a little while you focus on another system. In general, I think the benefits of being slightly more fit far outweigh the pitfalls of not doing any sort of fitness training.
Especially for a recreational athlete. Like if you're not pursuing the top tier elite 1% of performance, then actually just being a little bit fitter and healthier is probably just going to have a positive impact upon your life, as well as your training and your results from training. Yeah. So I think it's about taking a step back, like you say, questioning the why, because questioning the why helps you set the expectations. I think a big problem people have is that they think that adding a shitload more cardio or being fitter is going to affect their performance positively. Like they think their work capacity is going to be greater. I think your strength endurance is definitely not as closely related to pure cardiovascular fitness as people like to think. Like it's not like if you increase your ability to walk from half an hour to an hour, that all of a sudden your ability to recover in between sets at 80% for 6 reps is going to get that much better. That's a case of improving work capacity, which is what you were touching on earlier. Don't have 16 minutes between sets. Yeah.
It goes both ways. But, that's kind of taking the wrong sort of approach to cardio. You shouldn't be using cardio to necessarily improve your training, because the two aren't that closely linked. Cardiovascular fitness and strength sports don't go as hand in hand as we'd like to think. However, the host of benefits, like I was saying before, that comes with being more cardiovascularly fit far outweighs the pitfalls. And those sort of benefits are going to be long-term health, day-to-day health and fitness and performance, not feeling like a fat piece of shit when you walk up a set of stairs, those kind of things. Just general life feels a little bit better, a bit more comfortable, and you reap the benefits of, potentially fighting off some long-term chronic health issues that come with being unfit.
Yeah, and I think specificity is the sort of key framework in that. Like you said, the cardiovascular doesn't necessarily transfer straight to strength endurance or max strength or anything like that, but it's about what you define as fitness. Like if you're a powerlifting athlete, fitness is probably actually more specifically your ability to handle the training loads, right? Your ability to do those sets of 6 at 80% and do shitloads of them and then recover and do your next session. They're separate physical characteristics or sort of arms of physical performance. And that's not to say that the two can't really complement each other when done really well. And that's, I think, the harder part, because there's so much, maybe misinformation is the wrong way to describe it, but there's a lot of talk around, you get people who see things like CrossFit and their idea of adding cardio to their lifting training is to like go outside and do 45 minutes of sled sprints until they nearly die and then expect to come in and be able to deadlift heavy the next day. Mm-hmm. So how would you approach that from a training perspective in that general term? Is it something you add an extra day in, do you think? Or do you go down the road of like, oh, maybe you just add 15 or 20 minutes to the end of a session or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I from my own personal perspective, so I walk for about an hour every day, or I try to walk for about an hour every day. And I try and get in a lot of incidental exercise. There's a couple of reasons. So the reasons I enjoy cardio extend past my desire to be generally fit and healthy, right? Because obviously my background is health scientist, my background is chronic disease prevention through a health science degree with a focus on nutrition. I have a big heart for long-term health and all that kind of stuff. But my walking itself, besides the fact that I want to walk my dog and make him happy, really helps my mental health as well. That's like my thinking time, my relaxation time, my meditation time. And that in itself helps prepare me, especially when I'm in prep for competition, helps prepare me for the big sessions that I'm going to have. It helps me like come down from the day's work or the week's work that's been kind of backlogging behind me and clear my thoughts and get me ready to perform that evening. And the actual aspect of walking doesn't tax me. It doesn't fatigue me. So not only do I get the cardiovascular benefits, I also get the health benefits in terms of mental health as well. In terms of more specific, like approaching improving work capacity or building some of that stuff in, I mean, there's going to be a case of assessing what you want as an athlete out of doing that stuff. Like if you're training for a powerlifting competition, your idea of adding in high intensity cardio is just going to be probably detrimental more than beneficial as you get closer to the comp. So sometimes it's just like sucking it up and saying, okay, well, I can't do that right now. But again, it comes back to the individual if they want to add that sort of stuff in and assessing their own recovery abilities, because some people can train 6 days a week, balls to the wall, and have a mix of like really high intensity cardio, like CrossFit is. They've built themselves into, it's kind of a battle of attrition. They've either built themselves into having that recovery ability, or the ones that you see that are successful automatically have it, and they've just been able to unlock it through the sport, right?
The genetic predisposition to insane work capacity.
Because I've tried to add 2 extra days of like high intensity conditioning or started adding it after sessions, and it just taxes me really quickly. Like I don't think I'd be a very good CrossFitter. I've got good endurance. I can do long cycling and long rowing and that kind of stuff when I train for it. But like high intensity stuff, lifting, cardio every day just taxes me really, really quickly. And then on the flip side of things, people can handle that really well depending on their own recovery ability. I think
I think the walking thing's a really easy one to do, right? Like that's always my go-to suggestion for, I want to add a bit of extra cardio to training, regardless of who the person is. The exclusion would be that, last 6, maybe 10 weeks in a powerlifting meet. Like I'm not going to go and tell you to add a bunch of stuff to your training at that point, because the risk isn't worth the reward. I don't think in a short time frame like that. But if you're someone who trains as a powerlifter and you train 5 days, well, let's say 4 days a week, which I feel like is sort of the average in a lot of the people that I coach. You train 4 days a week, you lift pretty heavy, you have a deload every now and again, but you don't have any other physical activity outside of lifting, right? If your only exercise is training for powerlifting, then the easiest thing you can do, the lowest... Yeah, chew ice on the podcast. Good idea, man. Why don't you just get a bag of corn chips and start crunching?
I leaned away.
Yeah.
Fuck, I would love some corn chips right now.
Corn chips for breakfast. Nutrition. Anyway, so I think that's the low-hanging fruit, right? Like, Mark Bell made the 10-minute walk thing a really big thing. And as gimmicky as something like that can sound... It has real validity in an easy, low-hanging fruit to add to your day. If you work in an office and all you do is sit on your ass for 8 hours a day, and then you come to the gym and you train your fucking ass off for 2 hours, and then you go home and sit on the couch, the first thing you can do is just get up in the morning, like go for a walk, listen to a podcast, listen to music, listen to the sounds of nature and the cars screaming past you on the highway.
Listen to Peak Speak.
Listen to Peak Speak. Classic. Self-plug. And I think that's the really easy starting point. Don't go into like, I'm training 4 days a week, so I'm going to walk for an hour 6 days a week and do it regardless of how I feel and those sort of things. Start slow. Add 1.5 an hour walk in a week and see how you feel. And
I was going to say, that's literally exactly what I do. Train 4 days a week and walk 6 days a week for an hour.
Yeah, but you didn't just start doing that.
I know.
And that's my point, is not that you can't do that, but that you shouldn't start doing that. It's the same with anything in training.
Small.
Yeah, like
Ease
you've got to
into it.
start with the low-hanging fruit, and you've got to start building that up from the base. Because the first thing you're going to get out of jumping straight into some crazy extra cardio program is you're going to get to this point where it feels great for a week, and then 2 weeks later you feel like absolute shit and you can't recover from your real training, and that should be the priority if you're pursuing powerlifting performance.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
on
Sam,
the...
Wait. I'm busting so bad.
You have the smallest bladder in the world.
Yes. What do you want me to play?
I don't know. Something good.
Chopsticks?
That's not really good though, is it?
I think it is.
Yeah, but that's because you're a loser.
How good was that?
3 out of 10.
What about with the duet part?
That just sounds messy.
It sounded what?
Messy.
You do not appreciate the fine art of classical music, John.
Apparently not. So, we're sort of talking about priorities, I guess, in training, right? That's the underpinnings of why you would add something like cardio into it and how you would add it in from a training cycle perspective, which we've already touched on, is like, where are you in relation to a competition? But I think understanding how your priorities should shift depending on where you are in like your training lifetime, right? Like if you're going to train for the next 30 years, some of that has to be building a base. If you're the sort of person that has come to lifting weights and powerlifting and training and that sort of physical activity relatively late in life, I know like both of us have played sport our whole lives and been training for a reasonably long time at this point, but there are people who get to 25, 30 and beyond who haven't really done anything athletic since they were 15 or 16, or in some cases even younger, and understanding where that is and not using it as like you're a bad person because of that. It's not a judgment on who you are as a person or anything like that, but is instead just it needs to be an objective discussion about where are you and what are your priorities in training, because having a general base, right? Like Louis always talks about the pyramid only being as high as the width of the base. You need to have that base in order to improve your training in the long term, I think if you start with just powerlifting and all you ever do is powerlifting and you wear that cardio no badge as a badge of honor, then I think the long-term effect on both training, styles, capacity, your long-term results, that's definitely going to be marked, but also the impact upon your long-term health, which I think is more your area of expertise than it is mine. So I would be interested to hear your thoughts on that front.
Well, first of all, here's a little spoiler alert. So I've been coaching now for a long time and I've coached a shitload of people, right? The spoiler alert is that if you think powerlifting is training 3 reps and anything over 5 is cardio, those kind of people, with a very few exceptions, like if for the average person or for the 99% of people, are the shittiest powerlifters ever, because they've dug themselves into a hole where they can't break adaptation, where they can't actually get any stronger, where they're lifting weights outside of their ability to improve on in terms of a technical standpoint. So the stability issues are there, and therefore they develop these tightnesses. They're often the shittiest moving, shittiest improving, quickest to leave the sport kind of powerlifters. So regardless of where you are in your training life, and even more so if you're a little bit more experienced and have been stuck in this trap of I'm a powerlifter, therefore I only do sets of 1, 2, and 3, work capacity is a big thing. The more that you can gradually improve work capacity, the more work that you can do, you'll get stronger if you can do more stuff, right? And I think that's where so many people go wrong, is that they're like, oh yeah, again, wearing it as a badge of honor, 5 minutes rest, no, it's more like 15, oh, it's specific to comp, we have, fuck off. No, learn how to train, actually train. Don't fucking go to the gym and do 3 sets and call yourself done and go home. You never get any better. You just get good at failing the same weights, and no one thinks that's cool, right? So work capacity is a big thing. Perpetually aiming to be able to do more work, even if it's a little bit. Like it's not going to be like do 5 sets this week, 6 sets next week. That's the linear progression trap that you'll get stuck in if you add 10 kilos a week. If we all did that, we'd all be squatting 10,000 kilos. No. It's like across a block, you might be able to add 1 more set at the end or a little bit more weight at the end. And it's like we measure that slowly and we go up slowly. But if over time your work capacity is increasing, you're going to be a better lifter. You're going to be able to do more. The general cardio, the general health aspect is so low impact. I don't really think that many people have an excuse not to do it. Right? Unless you've got a defined body issue of some description, you can't fucking walk. You shouldn't really probably be powerlifting if you can't walk. But you know what I mean?
But even then, there are options for people who can't walk.
Exactly.
Walking's not the only solution to this problem. There are a million creative solutions if you want to work hard enough at it.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I should know.
Sucked more on ice. Now you're spitting it out.
Took that ice on.
Yeah,
it's really hot here, man. We don't live near Antarctica like you.
Motherfucker, it's going to be 40 degrees here today as well, so suck it.
Oh, it's going to be 40 degrees. Humidity 0. It's the humidity that gets you.
Yeah,
right?
well,
if I learned anything from Cool Runnings, it's the humidity that gets you. Right. Fantastic film, by the way.
Absolute classic.
So, yeah, there's not really much of an excuse. I don't think there's much of an excuse to not be adding some form of cardiovascular training, cardiovascular activity inside your training regime and life. It's going to make you healthier, fitter, long-term, all of that sort of stuff. Especially in a sport where we're already, it's pretty high impact on joints, on cardiovascular health in general, blood pressure's going through the roof. The more we can keep that stuff in check and in control, the better off we're going to be when we eventually leave the sport as well. Because that's the other thing, right? No one's going to really be doing this forever. That's the pipe dream. But in reality, most of us are going to stop our powerlifting lives one day and continue on with real life. And if you're...
powerlifting isn't real life? That's fucking wild.
If you're a bloody...
I don't know how to deal with this.
If you're a bloodied, broken shell of who you once were because powerlifting has driven you like a stake into the ground, you're not going to have a very fun rest of your life. And no one's really going to care when you go, oh yeah, but I used to bench press 200 kilos. They'll be like, no, you're the old man that's in the corner of the gym that's bragging about what they used to lift, and we all know you didn't.
You'll be that guy from Bigger, Stronger, Faster who lives in his van in the car park at Gold's Gym.
I basically already am that guy that's like, yeah, I used to lift this. I'm so redundant as a lifter.
Dude, you're fucking preaching to the choir on that one. Absolutely preaching to the choir. Yeah.
I think this is a good way to segue into the nutrition side of things as well. I think there's so much of an emphasis on eating for quote-unquote performance or, power food, yeah, McDonald's, 4 cheeseburgers, whatever, with a total ignorance. I'm not an idiot. There's so much, again, a badge of honor of eating like shit and not improving. I think as a whole that we're getting better at this stuff. I think like with things like the 10-minute walks, things like NEAT being a focus, this non-exercise activity thermogenesis stuff, like bringing your steps up, aiming for 10,000 steps. I think we're getting better at that, and I think we're probably getting better at the nutrition side of things as well. But it's so easy to eat for health and performance and eat for long-term health at the same time. And if you're half good at cooking, which you should be if your life revolves around training and food, it's not hard to fit that stuff in and make it taste good and live a good life.
Yeah,
right?
You don't have to eat boiled chicken, plain broccoli and white rice 6 meals a day. Like I think that's where a lot of this nutrition stuff has, and I know it's been one of my barriers to a better performance diet in the past has been this idea that you have to eat these really bland, boring foods all the time. Like, I fucking love food. It's no accident that I'm 140 kilos. That wasn't just because I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to be so strong at 140 kilos. It's because I really like eating and cooking, and I really like all of that stuff. Segue, I just ordered meat for the Burley Christmas party next week.
Fuck yes.
It's like 20 plus kilos of raw meat. It's going to be excellent.
I'm gonna try the snake method again.
Yeah, I'm doing like 2 whole briskets that I'm gonna sous vide for 48 hours.
Oh yes.
And then I'm gonna smoke for a few hours afterwards to like give it the bark and flavor and stuff. I'm doing
amazing
pulled pork, which is I do with the snake method, and then some spit roasted chickens.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
Anyway, back to talking about productive things. So I know that's certainly been a barrier for me is this idea that like dieting for performance or eating for performance has to be this really boring approach to food. And I think it's an unhealthy approach to food. I think it creates people with borderline eating disorders. And I'm certainly not an expert in psychology or anything like that, but I can only imagine that because people go down that road as well, like they go to the other extreme of wearing that as a badge of honor. Like, I don't need flavor, I just eat fucking boiled chicken all the time. It's like, man, that's not a very, a plan that's very conducive to long-term success. Because everyone's going to get bored at some point, It's that sort of stuff that works in the short term because you feel like you're really hardcore and then doesn't work in the long term.
The other thing is, right, you ever get someone that comes to you and they just move like shit, right? They don't know how bad their squats feel because they've never felt a good squat.
Yeah.
And then you spend time with them working on stability, working on mobility, get them in good positions, and they're like, what the hell? This feels amazing, right? And it takes time to get there. But their baseline, their average, their constant is shit, right? That's what they feel like when they squat. It's the same thing with nutrition. If you've been eating terribly for ages, or if you've been eating in an unholy deficit because you think if you eat any more, you're going to get fat, you don't realize how shit you feel until you start to feel good.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing with a lot of people is like their baseline performance they think is normal and think is okay. And then when they start eating in a way that's more conducive to health, they start to feel really good and they start to have energy and they start to perform better.
Yeah.
And it's like the more time that you spend eating shit, the worse off you're going to feel. Now, that said, That's not to say that you should be eating quote-unquote clean all the time. First off, that term cleaning is the most ridiculous thing you'll ever hear in your entire life.
I just hose all my food off, regardless of what it is.
Oh, God, it's so stupid.
Get my Big Mac and hose it off. It's clean. It's fine.
Like, I'm borderline ranting right now.
Rant away, Thomas. Angry Thomas is my favourite Thomas.
Let me give you a quick example, right? Let's say you're in a ketogenic diet. Inherently, as humans, we know that some things are good. Like, people aren't fucking dumb. People are already educated. People have a good idea of what good food is and what bad food is. Intuitively, right? We know that fruit and vegetable is good. Good is going to change definition based on your eating system. So all of a sudden, if you're in a ketogenic diet, oh, bananas are bad because they've got sugar, therefore they're not clean. Right? They're not clean to that specific eating system. So this idea of clean eating is bullshit because it's so secondary to the overall system. That's the important thing to take away with nutrition stuff, is that it's systematic. And it's about the parts of the system coming together. If the average system is really good, you're going to feel good all the time. And having a little bit of discretion outside of that, having some discretionary food, isn't going to impact the overall system if the overall system is averagely good.
I really like... Matt Vincent from Hate Brand Goods he's like lost a bunch of weight since he stopped competing, and he talks about his like ongoing nutritional strategy involves 3 steps. Did it have a face? Did it grow in the ground, or can I identify it as one thing? Like, that's a sweet potato. It's like, if it fits all those categories, I'll eat it. If it doesn't fit those categories, maybe I'll eat it occasionally, but it's like, that 80-20 rule. Like, everyday decisions need to be, on average, pretty good. And then that gives you the leeway to eat the cheeseburgers and scoff donuts like you might die tomorrow.
Exactly. I mean, like, opening up the nutrition can of worms can put us down a very deep rabbit hole, and I think it's kind of outside the scope of this general conversation. Like, the nutrition aspect was really to say that eating for general health in the long term, again, chasing better heart health, better artery health, all that kind of stuff, keeping blood pressure low, keeping blood triglycerides lower, keeping blood cholesterol low, all that sort of stuff is important. And it's so easy to manage in your general system just by eating more vegetables, eating more fiber, eating generally good food as your base. Yeah.
It's not only easy to manage, but it's also low impact. Like, people demonize these things because they think they're going to drastically change the results. And maybe you'll see a little bit of a decrease initially as you adjust to any new system, be it more cardio or nutrition or things like that. There'll be a period of adjustment. That's that adaptation period that happens, and that's okay, as long as you know that going forward, that 1 or 2 steps backward is going to set you up for more steps forward in the long run. And I think if you can understand that, then you're going to just have an overall, as much as I fucking hate the word, holistic approach to health and performance. Because if you're a healthier human, you're going to perform better.
Why do you hate the word holistic?
Oh, because it's used by a bunch of wankers who use it as a catch-all term for their hippie bullshit. I think it's like empowerment and a few other words in the fitness industry that I think just get a little too much airtime. They become the buzzword of the day or the month, and they get used in a way that doesn't reflect what I consider to be the real meaning of it.
Which sucks, because it takes away from the real meaning of things like that, which are good words to use.
Yeah, like, it's not that I dislike the word, so that's probably a better point. It's not that I dislike the word, it's that I dislike the use of the word, or the misuse of the word.
Yeah.
Like, you're not empowering someone in strength training if you're putting them in a position of external authority at all times and forcing them to rely upon your decisions and your directions. That's not fucking empowerment. That's not how it works.
Can you expand on the external authority bit? Like, what do you mean by that?
So, I don't claim to be a psychologist. I've said that more than once, and I don't claim to fully understand this subject yet. It is something I've only just recently been introduced to. But it's the idea is internal or external authority. So internal authority is you being able to make decisions and and be decisive in what you're doing and the direction you're going in whatever pursuit you have. External authority is relying on someone else to validate your decisions, to make the decisions for you. So if you're, like, using training as an example, if you're the sort of person that comes into the gym and, like, every time they come in, and I'm sure you've got people like this as well as I do and most coaches do, people who they need to run every decision they make in training by you. Like, I'm thinking about trying this. I'm thinking about trying that. And it's like, well, at some point, why don't you just try it and then come and talk to me about your experiences? It's external authority. I don't think is a very conducive, a very productive way to live in the long term, because it leaves you dependent on someone else. And I think empowerment is often used as a disguise for external authority. People are empowering people to make better decisions, blah, 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 but actually they end up in a position where the person who's being empowered, the empoweree, is actually just entirely dependent upon the external authority of their coach or their trainer or whatever the relationship is there.
Yes.
Instead of actually properly empowering people, which is providing the knowledge and the information and the support to allow them to make informed decisions themselves. I think that would be true empowerment. And I know that's how you coach, and I know that's how I coach. Is this idea that we're not here to hold your hand through this whole process for the rest of your life. We're here to help you learn about what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and understand the principles, and then be able to apply those principles to your situation. That's what all of our podcasts are going to be about, right? I don't think we spend a lot of time getting into specifics. Like, we've just spent the last 45 minutes talking about general principles, because that's how you start with all of these things. You learn the principles, you understand the principles, and then you apply them to your situation. And that's, I think, what real empowerment is. Yeah,
and and you touched on this earlier off air, but like this idea of coaching with those two benchmarks, like internal and external authority. If you just use external authority as a coach and you're going by certain markers or certain protocols, and you're just like, yep, that happened, therefore that means this, therefore do that, and you're removing the internal authority and the actual lateral thinking around that stuff, you can really dig yourself into a hole of having an incomplete practice.
Yep. If you rely upon some external system to tell you how to, or some external algorithm to tell you how to program for someone, or how to teach a movement, or how to describe a movement, all of those sort of things lead to a really, I think, really rigid and sort of stuck approach to training. Like, it's really hard to make improvements as a coach if you are reliant upon methods. I know the Juggernaut guys have done such an excellent job over the last 5 or 10 years in preaching this idea of principles, not methods. You know, it's not this method, this is the best way to do things. It is, here are the principles, here's a starting point for you, go and have an experiment, like go and play, go and learn what works and what doesn't. I think that's a message that is so missed by people, and like, honestly, I think it's because it's a bad business model in many ways, right? Because of your pursuing redundancy as a coach. Like, that's my pursuit as a coach, is I want to make myself redundant. I want to be in a position where you have at least all of the knowledge that I have, or very, very close to it, and maybe I'm a sounding board for ideas or discussions to further your knowledge and my own knowledge. You know, like having an athlete who doesn't just take my word as gospel, but instead questions the decisions I make. I find that really invigorating, because it helps me solidify my ideas.
Exactly.
I've had my mind changed on things. Like, I like to consider myself much more open-minded now than I was 5 or 6 years ago when I started coaching. And I continue to become more open-minded as I improve and mature as a person. It's no longer, this is the way. It's, here's a map to the million different pathways. Let's walk this way together and see what happens.
Yes. Awesome, man. All right. I think we need to cut it there.
That works for me.
5 stars. Put us on Instagram at the end.
I just had a complete blank about where we go from there. How do we finish a podcast? We just fucking...
I don't know. It's the worst part. I just kind of assume that when we say, okay, well, that's about it, that people are like, yep, tune out.
Yeah, pretty much. But if you happen to still be listening, like Thomas said, give us a 5-star review. Tag us in your Instagram stories. Share it with your friends. Tell your mum.
I just like doing that because I like putting the little GIFs on top.
Me too, man. I spend an inordinate amount of time scrolling through those until I find a random and really context-dependent GIF that makes no sense.
Excellent. Perfect. Exactly. Yeah, we're busy coaches. We spend all our time shitting on the toilet looking for GIFs.
Excellent.
All right. See you next time.
See you guys.